The observation deck of the Vex Prime Arena hung high above the combat floor, where species from across the known galaxy gathered to watch their warriors prove their strength. The metal railings were cold beneath Commander Lyra's hands as she stood alone at her station. Her large alien eyes fixed on the holding chambers below Lyra was a Zental, a species known for their precision, their logic, and their calm assessment of all situations. She had been chosen by the Galactic Council to observe this particular match because she never allowed emotion to cloud her judgment. Yet even she felt a strange pull as she watched the human prisoner being led down the stone corridor toward his cell. His name was Jake Morrison, and he came from a small planet that most galactic citizens barely knew existed. Earth had only recently joined the larger community of intelligent species, and many still questioned whether humans truly belonged among the advanced civilizations that controlled the stars. Jake Morrison was about to answer that question in the most public way imaginable. The human was smaller than Lyra expected, his body lacking the enhanced musculature and reinforced skeletal structure that most arena warriors possessed. He was also completely unarmed and unarmored, walking between guards with the calm of someone who had already accepted his fate. Lyra zoomed her visual sensors closer, studying his face for signs of fear or doubt. She found neither in the preparation chamber. Jake was offered every advantage. The arena officials presented him with standard battle armor, a weapon of his choice, genetic enhancers that would temporarily increase his strength and speed. He could choose plasma rifles or energy blades or sonic weapons that could collapse a warrior from 3 distances away. The officials explained each option in careful detail, their voices professional and detached. Jake refused everything. The arena officials exchanged confused glances. Some looked offended, as if the human had insulted them by declining the gifts of Vex Prime technology. Others seemed merely baffled, unable to process why any creature would choose to enter combat without every possible advantage. One older official, a Kelter with gray skin and tired eyes, simply shook his head and left the room. When the news reached the observation deck, Lyra heard the reactions from other observers around her. They laughed, not with genuine amusement, but with the harsh sound of beings who had just witnessed something they considered foolish. A Drevian warrior named Var actually spoke aloud, his translation device making his words clear in the common tongue that most species used. This human chooses death. Vior said the match will be over before it begins. Lyra did not respond. She continued watching the monitors as Jake Morrison was led from the preparation chamber toward the arena floor. Her fingers moved across her data console, pulling up everything she could find about humans. She had read reports. Of course, the Galactic Council provided data on all new species, detailed information about their history, their biology, their technological advancement. Yet the data felt hollow now. Watching this young human walk toward almost certain death with his head held high, the arena of Vex Prime was an ancient structure, carved from the living rock of the planet thousands of years ago. Its walls rose high enough that the crowd could number in the millions. Though today, the attendance was only a few 100,000. Species of all kinds filled the stone seats, their various forms and colors creating a strange tapestry of galactic civilization. They had come to see history, to witness the moment when a primitive species would be proven incapable of competing with the established powers. Jake Morrison stepped onto the arena floor, and the light hit him directly. The sun of Vex Prime was harsh and bright, and the human had to shield his eyes for a moment as they adjusted to the brightness. He was dressed in simple gray clothes, nothing that would protect him from harm, nothing that would aid him in violence. He looked fragile, small, almost helpless against the vastness of the arena. Then the gate on the far side of the arena opened, and Kree emerged. Kree was a legend among arena warriors, a name known throughout every station and colony and spacefaring civilization. He was gentle like Lyra, but larger, his body covered with the scars of 1,000 victories. His armor was custom designed, reinforced with materials that could withstand direct energy weapon fire. His primary weapon was an energy blade that had been in his family for 3 generations. Passed down through countless champions, Lyra watched as Kree saw Jake for the first time. The gentle warrior seemed confused. Then amused, he looked toward the observation deck as if asking whether this was truly the opponent he had been promised. Then he simply smiled, a predatory expression that made it clear he was already planning how quickly he would end this. The announcer called out the rules. The match would continue until one warrior could not continue, either through surrender or incapacity. The arena was neutral ground. Weapons and armor were permitted, but not required. The crowd would determine whether mercy would be shown at the end. Jake Morrison stepped forward and raised his hands, empty fists facing outward, in what Lyra understood to be a sign of respect among humans. It was an old gesture, one that predated his species' modern civilization, one that communicated readiness without aggression. Kree drew his energy blade. The weapon hummed to life with a sound like distant thunder. Lyra stood motionless at the observation rail, and without fully understanding why, she leaned forward slightly. Her heartbeat, the organ that Zentals rarely allowed to accelerate regardless of circumstance, began to beat faster. The match was about to begin, and something told her that what she was about to witness would matter far more than the council had anticipated when they arranged this combat test. The crowd fell silent. Jake Morrison took a breath, and the battle began. The energy blade cut through the air with a sound like crackling electricity, leaving a visible trail of blue light as Kree moved with the trained precision of a warrior who had defeated thousands of opponents before. The Zental champion was faster than Jake Morrison in every measurable way. His reflexes had been enhanced through years of combat training combined with natural Zental superiority. His armor could deflect most physical attacks. His weapon could slice through reinforced materials. Kree expected the human to run. He expected to see fear in those small human eyes, expected to watch desperation override logic. The Zental champion had fought many species over his lifetime, and each one had shown the same pattern of response at the moment they realized the odds against them. Jake Morrison charged forward instead. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that rippled through the arena like wind through grain. The decision made no logical sense. The human was walking directly toward a death blow, offering himself to Kreeblade with the same way someone might offer themselves to a predator at the waterhole. During drought season, Kree actually laughed. His laugh was deep and genuine, the sound of a master warrior encountering something he found amusing. "This will be easier than I thought," Kree said through his translation device. The words broadcast to every being watching. The energy blade rose higher, preparing to come down in a single devastating stroke that would end the match in seconds. Kree was already imagining how he would celebrate this quick victory, already planning what he would say to the crowd, already thinking about the evening celebration where the other arena masters would congratulate him on the fastest win of his career. Jake Morrison did something that changed everything. Did not try to dodge. Instead, he raised his left arm directly into the path of the falling blade, and the energy weapon crashed against his forearm with a sound like lightning striking stone. The impact should have severed his arm completely. The blade should have burned through flesh and bone as if they were nothing. The arm was still attached to his body when the blade withdrew. The crowd erupted into confused noise. Observers stood from their seats, their various alien voices creating a cacophony that the arena's translation system struggled to process. Kree stared at his blade, then at the human, completely unable to process what had just occurred. Jake Morrison was bleeding. A terrible burn marked the length of his forearm where the energy blade had touched his skin. The flesh was blackened, smoking, surely in unbearable pain. Yet the human did not cry out. He did not fall backward. He did not show any sign of panic or regret at his decision. He simply moved forward again, pressing his advantage while Kree was still processing what had happened. This time Jake aimed lower, going for Kree's chest in a move that was utterly lacking in technical precision, but terrifying in its directness. It was the kind of attack that a trained warrior would see coming and counter easily. An obvious movement that any serious combatant could avoid. Kree did avoid it, but only just his armor deflected the worst of the blow, and the human fist bounced off reinforced metal. The impact clearly hurt Jake more than it hurt Kree, sending a flash of pain across the human face. But again, he did not hesitate. Lyra watched from the observation deck, her analytical mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The human should be dead. The human should have surrendered the moment he realized he could not win through strength or speed or technology. Yet Jake Morrison fought with an intensity that seemed to grow with each wound instead of diminish. At the data station, the Drevian warrior made a comment about primitive creatures fighting with primitive desperation. Lyra did not respond to his words. She kept her focus entirely on the arena floor, entirely on the human who refused to follow the logical conclusion of his own limitations. Kree regrouped, his training reasserting itself over his initial shock. The Xenal champion had been tested before, though admittedly not by someone as obviously outmatched as this human. The key to maintaining dominance was to reset mental patterns and return to the strategies that had always worked in the past. He began a systematic assault, using his superior speed and strength to control the fight. He would move, attack, withdraw before the human could counter. This was basic arena combat, the kind of tactics he had used to defeat hundreds of opponents. Jake Morrison started bleeding in new places. A gash opened above his left eye where a Kree blade had caught him. A punch from Kree armor gauntlet left deep bruises across his ribs. The human was being systematically broken down, piece by piece, injury by injury. Yet with each injury, something strange happened instead of weakening. Jake seemed to find strength from somewhere unknown. His movements became sharper. His determination appeared to increase, and most oddly, his focus on Kree never wavered. The Xenal warrior began to feel something he had never experienced in an arena before. Uncertainty, a small seed of doubt that grew with each exchange where the human refused to fall, refused to surrender, refused to accept the logical outcome of this combat. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were watching in silence, watching something that violated all understanding of how such matches were supposed to proceed. Lyra leaned further forward, her hands gripping the observation rail so tightly that the metal began to deform slightly under the pressure of her grip. This was not the death of a primitive species. This was something else entirely, and she could not look away. The sun of Vex Prime moved slowly across the sky. As the hours of combat continued, the ground of the arena became wet with blood. Both the dark fluid that flowed from the human wounds and the lighter blue that occasionally dripped from Kree. The champion warrior was breathing heavily now, his earlier confidence replaced by something more dangerous than fear, something closer to determination mixed with the first real challenge of his career. Jake Morrison was barely standing. His face was swollen. One eye completely closed. His left arm hung at an awkward angle, likely broken from a particularly vicious attack that had sent him crashing against the arena wall. His breathing came in ragged gasps that spoke of at least 2 broken ribs by every measurement. By every logical assessment, the human should have been dead already. The time had passed when any arena match at this level would typically conclude. A warrior who had taken this much damage would be expected to ask for mercy, to call out for the match to end, to accept the inevitable conclusion and live to fight another day if possible. But Jake Morrison did not ask for mercy. He did not ask for anything except to continue fighting. Kree was changing too. The Zental champion was no longer moving with the smooth precision of his earlier attacks. His movements were becoming more aggressive, more desperate. The distance between exchanges was growing longer as both warriors needed more time to recover. Then something shifted in the arena. A sound rippled through the crowd. A murmur that started at one end of the stands and traveled like ripples through water. The spectators had begun to notice what the arena officials had noticed, what the observers on the observation deck had begun to understand. The human was winning, not through strength, not through superior technique, not through the power of advanced technology or enhanced biology. The human was winning through something that most galactic civilizations had nearly forgotten how to recognize. He was winning through refusal. Jake Morrison had reached a point where continuing to fight caused him nothing but suffering. Every movement sent pain through his injured body. Every breath was agony with those broken ribs. Every raised arm reminded him of the damage to his shoulder and elbow. Yet he continued to move forward, to search for openings, to press his attacks with no regard for his own destruction. Kree felt it too. The realization that he was facing something beyond physical advantage. He was facing a creature that seemed to operate from a different understanding of what it meant to engage in combat. The Zental champion had always fought with the goal of victory in his mind, with the desire to win and emerge triumphant. Jake Morrison appeared to be fighting for something else entirely. He was fighting as though the outcome was already determined, as though his defeat was certain, and he had simply decided that this fact would not matter. This infuriated Kree more than any trash talk could have. That the Zental warrior roared, a sound that made some of the younger spectators flinch. He brought his energy blade up high and moved forward with all his speed and strength remaining, intending to end this match immediately, to prove that his dominance was absolute. Jake Morrison saw the attack coming and did not move out of the way. He stood his ground and brought up his good arm to block the collision, sent both warriors backward for the first time in the entire match. Kree was knocked off balance. The Zental warrior stumbled, his armored feet scraping across the arena floor as he fought to maintain his position. Jake Morrison, with his broken arm and shattered ribs and countless bleeding wounds, had forced back the undefeated champion of Vex Prime. The crowd realized what it meant before Kree did. This human was going to hurt him, not defeat him, not kill him, but hurt him in a way that the mighty warrior had never experienced. A human from an unknown planet, a creature that Kree had assumed was beneath consideration, was going to inflict real damage upon him. Lyra felt something shift in her own understanding as she watched the next exchange. The words she had learned about humans during her research suddenly took on new meaning. They were described as relentless, as stubborn, as possessing an unusual resistance to surrender, even in the face of overwhelming odds. These traits had been listed in clinical language as minor evolutionary curiosities, adaptations to the harsh environment of their home world. But seeing those traits displayed in front of her, watching them manifest as a warrior continued to fight knowing he would ultimately lose, changed how she understood them entirely. These were not simple survival instincts. These were not primitive responses. These were choices that the human was making moment by moment, decision by decision. Every time Jake Morrison got up after being knocked down, he was choosing to continue. He was not driven by the possibility of victory or the hope of winning. His body should have forced him to surrender, should have released him from this self-imposed suffering. Yet his mind or his spirit, or whatever force animated humans and made them different from other species, chose defiance instead. The match entered its final phase. Both warriors were now at the edge of collapse. Neither one could continue much longer. The arena had become something beyond a simple combat test. It had become a test of something more fundamental. Something that went beyond the physical realm entirely. Cree was breathing as hard as the human now. His movements had slowed to match Jake's pace for pace. The Zental champion realized with growing certainty that he was going to need to make a choice, that he could no longer simply wear the human down through attrition because his own body was failing him just as badly. Jake Morrison continued forward, step after step after step, bleeding, broken, refusing to be anything other than what he had decided to be in this moment. A warrior who would not surrender regardless of what the universe demanded of him. The arena had become strangely quiet, even with the crowd still present. The weight of what they were witnessing seemed to press down on all the spectators, reducing them to silence. The only sounds were the heavy breathing of two warriors at the edge of their physical limits and the occasional scrape of feet against stone. Cree made one final attack. It was not the precise, measured assault of a trained champion. It was the desperate swing of a being who had finally accepted that he could not out-technique this opponent. He simply raised his blade and brought it down. With all the remaining strength he could gather, Jake Morrison moved to block, but his broken arm would not obey him fully. The limb began to rise, but then faltered. Unable to support the weight of the impact, the human realized that he could not block this attack, so instead, he did something that made no tactical sense at all. He stepped forward into the blow. Blade came down and struck him across the chest. The human screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the arena. This was the moment where Jake Morrison should finally fall. This was where his body should finally betray his will and collapse into unconsciousness from the trauma. Instead, he moved forward one more time. His movement brought him close enough to Cree that the Zental warrior could do nothing but stand there. Jake raised his good arm and placed his hand against the energy blade itself, the burning weapon searing his palm, his fingers, his wrist. As he pushed the blade back and away, he whispered something to Cree. Words were quiet, meant only for the champion warrior, but in the stunned silence of the arena, several observers began to strain their hearing toward the sound. The translation devices picked up fragments. Though the full meaning took a moment to emerge, Jake told Cree that he was strong. He told the champion warrior that his technique was flawless, that his training had been complete, that his skill was beyond dispute. Cree was the superior fighter in every measurable way that was undeniable. Then Jake said something that changed everything. Said that Cree already knew this, that the champion warrior had always known from the moment they began fighting that he was stronger and faster and better trained. And yet, Cree had still decided to engage in this combat. Why? Jake whispered, why fight? The human continued, if you already know you will win, why does a being of such power need to prove it against someone who cannot match you? Is your strength so fragile that it requires victory to feel certain? Jake gasped for breath, the words coming with tremendous effort from his broken body. But he continued because he had something more to say. I came to this arena knowing I would lose. Jake said, and I came anyway. Because my worth is not measured in victory, I came. Because refusing to fight would have said something terrible about my people and about me, something that I would have to live with. I came because existing means something. I came because the choice to stand and be tested matters. Cree stood motionless, his blade still held in his hand, his body covered in his own blood. Jake continued whispering because the human understood that his time was running out, that his body was failing him rapidly, that he needed to finish whatever this was before he collapsed. You are the greatest warrior I have ever seen. Jake said to the champion, your power is undeniable and your victory was never in doubt, but I want you to understand something. There is a kind of strength that comes not from dominating others, but from refusing to be destroyed by them. There is a kind of victory that has nothing to do with who remains standing at the end. I Came here to show my species' worth. Jake breathed, and I am going to do that, whether I win or lose. Does not matter anymore, because I have already shown that humans will face the impossible without fear. We will stand against superior forces without surrender. We will not be broken by circumstance or power or overwhelming odds. Kree lowered his weapon slowly. The crowd gasped. A sudden intake of millions of voices expressing shock and confusion in the history of the arena of Vex Prime. An undefeated champion had never stepped back from a victory. The match was supposed to end only when one warrior could not continue instead. Kree did something that no one had anticipated. He extended his hand to Jake Morrison. The human stumbled forward and took it using his one good arm. Kree pulled Jake up to his feet, keeping him steady when his broken legs threatened to give way. The arena erupted into sound that shook the very walls around them. On the observation deck, Lyra stood with her hands over her mouth, her large alien eyes wide with understanding. She had just witnessed something that rewrote every assumption about human worth. The data she had read, the reports she had studied, they all suddenly clicked into place and revealed something she had been too blind to see. Humans did not measure strength the same way other species did. Humans measured worth through persistence, through commitment, through the choice to face impossible odds without surrender in that moment. Lyra understood what she had to tell the council, and she understood that they would not believe her until she showed them this memory, showed them the warrior and the champion, and the moment when a human made all of galactic civilization reconsider what true strength actually meant. The medical chambers of Vex Prime were not designed with humans in mind. The equipment had to be substantially modified to treat Jake Morrison. Basic biology was different enough from most galactic species that the standard healing procedures required significant adjustment. However, the medical technicians worked with dedication because something had changed in the arena that day. A human had shown them something that transcended normal protocol and procedure. Jake survived his injuries over the course of weeks. His broken bones fused together. His burns began to heal. His body slowly returned to functionality, though he would never be quite the same physically. The human would live to tell the story of his fight against Kree, requested to meet with him during his recovery. The two warriors sat together in the observation garden of the medical facility, overlooking the same arena where their match had taken place. Kree spoke first, his words careful and deliberate, translated into the common language that humans could understand. I have fought for 40 years of my life. Kree said, I have defeated thousands of opponents. I have been celebrated and honored and treated as the greatest champion that Vex Prime has ever seen. Kree paused, watching the human. But I had never met anyone like you until that day. I did not understand what I was facing. I thought I understood strength and power and what it meant to be a warrior. I realize now that I understood only one small piece of a much larger concept. Jake listened quietly. His injuries made speaking difficult and painful, so he mostly watched the great warrior express his thoughts. Your species has something that mine forgot somewhere along the path of advancement, Kree continued. We became focused on the measurement of strength, through physical dominance, through technological advantage, through genetic enhancement. We forgot that true strength comes from something that no technology can give you. We forgot about will. We forgot about persistence. We forgot about choosing to face the impossible. That day changed how I see myself. Kree told the human, it changed how I understand what a warrior truly is. Thank you for showing me something I had lost the ability to recognize. Messages were sent back to Earth telling the story of Jake Morrison battle. It became more famous than any military conflict could have been. The human returned to his people as something between a celebrity and a prophet. He did not seek that status, but it found him anyway. Lyra presented her full report to the Galactic Council. Her documentation included data analysis, sensor readings, medical reports on the injuries sustained. However, The most important part of her report was not data at all. It was her personal assessment and recommendation. She wrote that the Council had made fundamental errors in their evaluation of humanity. The humans could not be measured on the same scale that other species use for evaluation. Their strength did not lie in the power of their weapons or the advancement of their technology. It lay in something far more difficult to quantify, far more difficult to control. She wrote that humans possessed the capacity to endure suffering without breaking, to continue fighting for principle, rather than survival, to choose honor and dignity over any guarantee of victory. These were not primitive traits of an inferior species. These were rare and remarkable qualities that the galactic community desperately needed to understand and respect. Most importantly, Lyra recommended that the Council reconsider its approach to human integration. She suggested that humans should be treated not as a military resource or a potential strategic asset, but as teachers of a different way of understanding strength and commitment and courage. The Council met for many weeks debating her report. Many maintained their position that humans were still too underdeveloped to be trusted with significant roles in galactic affairs. Others raised concerns about the military implications of granting humans too much influence and respect. But slowly, Lyra's argument took root in the minds of the Council members. Slowly, the video recordings from the arena began to circulate among the various species that comprised galactic civilization. Other beings watched Jake Morrison face the impossible, watched him refuse to surrender, and began to understand what Lyra had understood. Change came slowly, but it came over the years that followed. Lyra became the primary liaison between the Galactic Council and human delegations. She was often the first voice that humans heard when they entered diplomatic spaces, the first being who treated them with understanding rather than suspicion. Her reports became famous throughout the galactic archives, reports that emphasized human value not in terms of military capability or technological innovation, but in terms of the spirit they possessed, the way they approached challenges, the way they valued honor and dignity and principle in ways that other species had lost or never understood. And a story of the bare human warrior who had fought against the undefeated champion became a legend told in schools across dozens of worlds. It became a teaching tool for young beings learning about courage and commitment. It became a symbol of what true strength actually meant to those willing to understand. Years after the match, Kree and Jake became friends despite the vast differences in their physiology and culture. They would meet and discuss philosophy and the nature of warfare and what it meant to live with honor. They would walk through gardens on planets that humans had never imagined existed, and sometimes, when Lyra would observe them together, she would feel something in her chest that she had never felt before as a Zental. It was not a sensation that her data could easily quantify. It was not something that her analytical mind could completely process, but she recognized it anyway, because Jake Morrison had shown her what it was. It was the understanding that the universe was much larger and much more complex than the certainty of cold logic. It was the recognition that some of the most valuable things in existence could not be measured in numbers or weapons or technological advancement. It was the beginning of wisdom, and it all started because a human from a small planet decided to step into an arena with only his bare hands and his unbreakable will to refuse the easy path of surrender.